Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. How's it going, Keisha?
It's well. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
Good deal.
How are you, Maya?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Megan, how's it going?
I'm good. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Just waiting for everyone else to get in before we start. How was everyone's break? Pretty good. Lolly,
Well, I did classwork the whole time. I was trying to stay ahead.
Oh, that's no good. You gotta have some enjoyment there, Keisha. Lolly, how are you?
Oh, hi. I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we just got a few more people to come in. Let me get everybody else in and we should start. Chandler, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Kyle, how's it going?
Good. Nice to meet you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Charles, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Nicholas, how's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Aneen, how are you?
Good. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise. Jasmine, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, Professor. How are you today?
I'm good, I'm good. And let me just make sure, I think we got everybody here. Okay, everybody's able to see me and hear me well? Okay. Maybe if you can't, say something or hit the chat and I'll respond. All right, everyone. Welcome. It's very nice to meet you. This is Multicultural Counseling. I'm Professor Ross. Very nice to meet you all. I look forward to this term, getting through everything. And hopefully this could be an engaging class, right? Not a boring one. It's an interesting course, I will say, because it tends to come off kind of controversial. Well, I would, maybe controversial, but I would more aptly say sensitive, right? We're dealing here with some very sensitive topics. And we all come from our own backgrounds, our own cultures, our own point of views, perspectives. our own ideologies, philosophies. And so everyone's going to have their own opinions about things, the nature of the world and how people should be, how things should go and how people should act, and who has power, who does not, all the dynamics going on. So it'd be interesting. But with that being said, I want to say that the class is definitely a safe space. We want to get thoughts out there so everyone can be expressive, right? The more expressive you are, the better everyone is to understand one another and one another's point of view. So in some way, this is sort of a multicultural experiment, right? Our course in itself has people who look completely different, look like they come from different walks of life, cultures, ethnic backgrounds, sex, all types of things. So which will make the class even more engaging. I want to foster like a class of asking questions, talking, amongst each other. We'll have like breakout rooms for discussions on certain topics, and we're going to try to learn from one another. As this topic is fluid, right? As the world opens up even more to more people, things change, we get more information about people. So the topic is definitely not a closed-ended topic or the field in itself. So it's dynamic, it changes, the world changes, politics change, everything changes, right? So we're all gonna learn as we go along from one another and go from there. My background, quickly, I'm what we call an international psychologist. What that means is I take applications, theories, things that I've learned through the practice of Western psychology, but use it in a global context with the understanding of removing bias towards other cultures, right? So basically not using psychology as a monolith of just a Western ideation of practices and beliefs and applications, but using things like meaning making, what makes meaning to other people around the world, looking at context of political systems, government, language, ethnic background, history, and whether or not people even recognize psychology as a whole in different parts of the world, right? People, there are people who have concepts of, spirituality as opposed to dealing with issues that we may describe as mental disorders or mental health issues. So definitely it's trying to apply what we've learned and make it universal, but in the context of not forcing our own beliefs and practices on others based on our own personal biases from our nature and our nurture from which we come. Does that make any sense? Okay. Yeah, so a brief history. I started out as a business person. Started out as a business person, so I also teach business. And I taught international business. So I started out as an international business person, going around, starting businesses around the world, purchasing real estate and things like that. So I started off working with different cultures, but in a different format, right? Making money. But obviously that has components of even psychology, because you do have to communicate, you have to understand agreements and disputes and negotiations and things like that. From there, so I got my MBA, and from there, I went and got my PhD. So my PhD is in psychology, but it's in international psychology. So simply put, you could be like, I'm a person that I used to work for the United Nations, but a person who could work for the UN to be sent all over the world to deal with crisis and trauma of people who are either impoverished or war or something of the sort. My actual practice in the field deals with primarily South Africans and Peruvians. So I did a lot of field work in South Africa, working on cases to help the townships out there. So they have townships, which are really tent hut cities, right? But they could occupy almost like 2 million people. So if you ever seen the movie District 9 with like the aliens, they filmed that in Johannesburg above like a real township, right? These kind of tent hut cities, but they can occupy up to a couple million people. So I worked on therapy and counseling with those populations and hearing those populations, the type of stories and trauma that those people face, young girls in particular, deal with, really traumatic events with people, sexual crimes, just horrible poverty situations. South Africa has the highest HIV population on planet Earth. So you're dealing with a lot of people suffering in many different ways, right? And let alone South Africa, has apartheid, which my dissertation was really on, dealt with the racial strife between the Dutch and the English, so whites versus blacks, in essence, right? And they're still dealing with that politically, economically. And also too, there's a middle group out there that I dealt with called coloreds, and they're basically, you could just say a hybrid. A lot of them are from the Middle East, India, or just mixed, will be classified as mixed race. So, really during apartheid, are some of you familiar with apartheid at all in South Africa? No one? Chandler, what is your knowledge based on that?
I read a book. It's by that comedian who was raised in South Africa during that time. Noah something, and he
Trevor
wrote
Noah?
a book on it. Yes, Trevor Noah. Yeah. I read that book, so I kind of just learned it through that. It was like a time when that was against the law. White people and black people being married or that kind of thing. And yeah, so that's kind of the majority that I know just through that book.
Okay. Anybody else know anything about apartheid? Okay. All right, apartheid simply put, if you guys understand kind of what happened here in the US, civil rights movement, slavery, all of that stuff to deal with the strife of African Americans versus white Americans here. It's very similar. But the South Africans during apartheid had pass law books, basically like passports, to show if you were black, if you were white, or if you were colored. Now, if you were black, you had the least amount of movement and least amount of rights to certain things and access to certain things. If you were colored, right? Colored here in the United States is sort of a very negative connotation, right? Colored typically, talks more of Black Americans, but colored there is more mixed, right? It's just more mixed ethnic groups. But if you were colored out there, you had more rights than Blacks, more access and more movement. And if you were white, you had, pretty much free to move and do as you will. So essentially racism, right? And so yeah, this class is going to cover kind of all of that. Very sensitive topics, and I want you guys to express your opinions and viewpoints and worldview, and we can hopefully make this class interesting. Okay, did everyone get the textbook? Anyone not get the textbook? Okay, so we're good on textbooks.
I got one, but I'm still waiting on the other one. I don't know what happened to it, but it's still saying it's on delay. So.
Okay. Yeah, as long as you got the primary one for now, you're pretty good, able to keep up with the readings and whatnot. Okay, now everyone complete some of the readings or all of the readings for this week? Anyone not complete the readings? Okay. So I think a good way to start out is maybe start out with some of your questions first about the nature of the course, what you think this course is about. I want to hear what you guys think the course is about. And what do you hope to gain from the course? So we can start off from there. I'll start off, let's do this. I will move from, looking at my screen, I'm going to move from person to person to ask what do they think the course is about, what they expect to get from this course that'll help them in their professional life and personal life. Chandler, you're first up on my screen, so let's go with you.
Okay. When I think of like the multicultural aspect, it's like how that plays into being a clinician in the field and how like working with different cultures and learning about different cultures and kind of how you bring that into your practice and into how you are a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. Keisha, you're next. Thoughts on the course? What do you think about the course or hope to gain from it?
Well, my thoughts on the course is after doing my readings, I think pretty much that it is trying to put us in a position to understand a person beyond assumptions and stereotyping. So to learn more of others' cultures and their norms and abnorms and to just not stereotype and be biased.
Yeah. Good. Nicholas, you're up. Thoughts?
Yeah. For me, what comes up, I feel like there's a big push right now, like in the field of psychology to break away from over pathologizing. And I think that a part of that is like just seeing the human that's in front of you, all of them.
Yeah.
And it's like if you really want to do therapy for the whole person, then, and if this cultural or some other identity is really important to them, then that has to be a focus of your therapy sessions. So yeah, I think it's just like awareness, humility, all that stuff. So.
Excellent, thank you. Haneen, thoughts?
Yeah, I think within the field of psychology, I'm kind of noticing the trend from like cultural tolerance to cultural competence to cultural humility. So I think just kind of gaining a deeper sense of how culture can really impact mental health and diagnosis and treatment and all of that.
Okay, excellent. Jasmine, you're up next. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think the course is going to be primarily, well, at least what I'm hoping it's going to be about is kind of to check our own internal bias. Because I know when it comes to just cultures, I focus things from my perspective. And so I'm hoping to gain a wider viewpoint. And also too, when it comes to pathologies, I know that from what I know is that the field is kind of limited when it comes to spiritual beliefs. And so I'm hoping to really figure out how to approach diagnosing individuals and differentiating that while accepting different spiritual beliefs.
Excellent. Maya, you're up next. Thoughts?
So as far as what I think the course is going to be, I think Keisha said it really well, just as far as understanding people who come from all different walks of life and backgrounds, and just having a better understanding of where everybody comes from and maybe the thought processes behind that. And then as far as what I want to gain from the class, I would like to be put in a position to where I never have to deny a client or say like, I'm not able to help you. I don't know enough. I didn't take the time to learn enough about, your culture, your background. So I think just having a better understanding in general.
Excellent. Lolly?
I would agree with the group because everyone said a little bit and there's little to add, but I would earn from this course understanding about different cultural identities, how we identify visible and invisible cultures, how we pay attention to different symbols or rituals or traditions and languages, and dresses and traditional everything that actually builds culture and helps us to understand how to work with particularly individual that presents this culture. So
Excellent. Next up is Kyle.
Yeah, I think somebody said it earlier, it's just, humility and awareness, especially the awareness part. That's, I have a pretty good grip on my own view of the world. So I'm always interested and down to hear what other people's views are, get a better perspective on things that are going on in the world. I'm not saying this class is going to answer every question, but
Yeah, of course.
Put me on the right path anyway. So
Excellent. Charles.
So when I think of multicultural, I think I see learning about different perspectives from different cultures and what is like in a different culture, one might be accepted and a different one is not accepted. So the differences, yeah.
Okay. Chloe.
Hello. Yeah, I just piggybacking off of what everybody else has kind of said, I'm, looking forward to the conversations that I think we're all going to have. I think Kyle, you just said this, but I obviously know a lot about my own culture, but I'm interested to learn more about everybody else's and also be able to like have those conversations, and kind of mimic how that'll look with future clients. And I think like a takeaway from like even some of these readings just right off the bat was like so much of these like assumptions that we make about people, they almost happen unconsciously. So it's like you really have to devote time and effort to becoming very culturally aware in order to make sure that you're, avoiding like ethnocentric parts of life and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to all of that.
Excellent. Megan, did I get you already? Okay, Megan, I think you're last. You can go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, so when I think about multicultural counseling, I kind of first think about just the importance of it to recognize differences, but then also not stereotype and understanding your own bias. And like I think Maya said, I hope to be a counselor that is accepting and a warm space for any culture. So I just want to like expand my repertoire for different cultural understandings.
Excellent. Those are all, really great assessments about the course. I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head with kind of everything all together about what the course is about. The course is about others, primarily picking up on others and building the skill to identify the values that others have, how they make meaning of things, sensitivities, body language, just responses, attitudes, things of that nature. But more importantly, that has to do with us, because we all do have our own nature and our own nurture that we've developed for all this time. And so it's extremely difficult to say you're completely unbiased in any regard, right? So we're going to try to make attempts to be more open about our personal biases, about how our worldview kind of shapes the way we think about other people based on whether the precepts of visual perception or the way we hear them talk or et cetera. And so more importantly, it's about kind of learning about ourselves, right? The more we learn about ourselves and become open to things about ourselves, the better we're able to help people from different walks of life that are not similar to ours, right? So that's a big component. I want to go through, brief culturally about myself, kind of how I landed, what I think made me land in this position in life where I'm at now. I come from a big family, the youngest out of 11 children. My mom's Black, my mom's African-American. My dad is Italian. Dad married Korean, So I have a Korean brother. My dad married a Polish. I have a Polish brother. Mom's side, people married into Mexican, Puerto Rican, just a lot. So really growing up, and I moved around a lot. I went to like 13 elementary schools. So I moved around a lot and I had to kind of immerse myself in different cultures and different types of people all the time. And especially just our family itself was just, it's like the United Nations or whatever. So we just kind of got some cultural competence and cultural intelligence growing up naturally, right? So I've kind of always had this openness towards people, regardless of who they are, where they come from, and try to be unbiased, but I try my best, right? Which means we're not perfect, and we probably won't all get some sort of perfect solution from this course, right? Being honest, but the point is to add to our repertoire to be better at what we're going to do, because things are changing very quickly, and people are adapting more to others quickly, and your clients are going to be from all over the place with all types of viewpoints. And we don't want to have those conflicts that kind of disregard others or make us not being able to work with certain clients. We'll start next by going around. Lolly, you're appearing first on my screen. Give me a little bit about, well, state your name appropriately, right? So I know and everyone else knows how to pronounce it appropriately. And give us a little bit about who you are and your background.
My name is Lali, L-A-L-I. So it's very easy to pronounce, like lollipop. I'm originally from Soviet Union, relocated 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. I have one daughter, she's 29. I don't know what to say. So my first degree is in design. My second degree is in marketing. I have MBA. And I probably, I don't know, all my life devoted to the marketing field, working in large corporations, but recently working with students and doing college admissions as a educational consultant, I understood that I really need a little bit more about psychology. And I turned to this path, and I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. One of the former Soviet states that you're from?
Yeah, the
Which
Georgia.
one?
Georgia.
Okay. Thank you, Lolly. Kyle, you're up next.
Let's see here. Yeah, not too complex, I guess. I live outside of Columbus, Ohio. Been here for most of my life. Early on, my dad was in the military, got to do a lot of traveling and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I was so young that, we went to a couple countries in Europe and various places, but I was so young that I don't remember any of it. And it was it's like my one chance in my life to experience other cultures and things like that. And like I said, I was too young to remember it. But other than that, I went to Ohio State, got a bachelor's in psychology, decided to move on here. I was thinking law school, but I decided I didn't want to work 70, 80 hours a week. So I'm going to take a different path. I'm going to go into the business side of psychology. But yeah, nothing too complex in my life history. So
Okay. All right, thank you. Charles?
So I'm Charles. I immigrated from the Philippines when I was 13. And I live here in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Charles. Chloe?
Hello. Sorry, I'm blanking on just what I was going to say. I graduated with a degree in psychology. I currently live and work in Los Angeles. I
work full time doing organizational psychology consulting. So like a little bit more on the business side, and hoping to get into counseling, pursuing a license in marriage and family therapy. Maybe want to go on and get a doctorate to do more like diagnostic testing type of work. But right now we're here and doing this, and yeah. I forget, did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, that's pretty
Okay.
specific. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. Megan, you're up next.
My full name is Megan Brigitte Baker. My middle name is Swedish. My grandmother is an immigrant from Sweden. I still have family over there, so I've visited a lot. My mother was Irish Catholic. I was raised very Irish Catholic. Since then, I've kind of diverted onto my own spiritual path. But I grew up in the central coast of California, a really small town, and I did my bachelor's in San Francisco. And yeah, I decided I've been working in restaurants for about 10 years, which actually has been kind of a gift in terms of exposure to different cultures, because it's definitely a melting pot. And all the restaurants I've worked in, I speak Spanish in the back and stuff. And yeah, so it's I think I'm just rambling now, but yeah, I guess that's it.
All right, awesome. Miss Nelson, I guess I was pronouncing your name wrong. Is it Kisha or Keisha?
It is actually Cache.
Cache.
Yes.
All right, I definitely wouldn't have got it on the first try. Not on the first try.
But my name is Cache, and this will be my 7th degree. I'm in the process of opening my own health center where I will combine all forms of healing: spiritual, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of it. And I'm in the process of having 4 books published. I'm a single mother of 2, about to be a grandma of a set of twins. And I am really excited about this class. We got a lot of culture going on here. I'm African American, but my mom is part African American, part Indian, and my dad is part Indian and African American. So I'm really excited to see what happens here.
Awesome. Thank you, Cache. I like that name. Who is up next? Maya, I think you're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maya Misra. My mom is white. She was born in Louisiana, and my dad was actually born in India. But he grew up and spent all of his life in Africa. And let's see, I graduated from the University of Texas in Austin, and I also just live in Austin. I think that's everything. There's not much to it.
Awesome. Next up is Chandler. Did I get you already? All right, you're next.
Hi, I'm Chandler. My last name is Fallon. I get felon and felon a lot, but it's Fallon. I am from Southern California, Santa Clarita. I graduated from the University of Arizona in May. I got a degree in psychology and in family studies and human development. Culturally, there's not that much to me. I'm half Norwegian, but I think the most cultural my family got is eat lefse on Christmas. So I don't really have a big cultural background. Right now I work I'm a full-time behavior therapist, and I work with kids ages like 4 to 20. So I'm able to work with a lot of families from different backgrounds, a lot of kids from different backgrounds. So I'm hoping this class will also kind of help me dig deep and do what I can to learn more. I'm currently living in Colorado, so
Nice.
that's kind of all there is to know about me.
Colorado is beautiful. Nicholas.
Hey, I'm Nick. born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I started out doing like business, finance, econ stuff out of school, and then like had an existential crisis when I was like 23, and then changed careers, and now I'm here. Yeah, I split my time. Half of it is for this program, and half of it is it's a hard thing to explain, but basically it's an animal rescue that also does youth empowerment programs. So it's kind of like a dual-sided thing. But yeah, I think ultimately I'd like to end up in this like an experiential type of practicing psychology that's based on nature or animals or something like that. But yeah, it's been quite an experience working with the kids that show up at the youth programs there, just because of how varied their backgrounds are, and also just you know, I grew up in a pretty like insulated bubble type of place, so it's really been I've been learning a lot. So this class is also timely in that way. So I'm hoping it'll help.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Haneen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Haneen. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. My dad is from Pakistan and my mom is from India. And they came to America after getting married and moved us to Texas. I went to UT Austin for college and I did neuroscience, but my mom is also a psychologist. So she strongly influenced my interest in the field and why I decided to do this program.
Excellent. Great. Jasmine?
Hi. So let's see, where do I start? Born and raised in Chicago, rural like area. Let's see. This is my second degree. So I have my first master's in public service management. I'm a first gen college student. My father was a veteran from Mississippi, so those southern roots come with me. But then also too, I've lived in Colorado. I've lived in North Carolina, so I like to get a little bit of I don't know. I'm a little diverse. I like to get my hands in everything. So yeah, I don't want to start rambling, but yeah, that's me.
Excellent. I'm from Chicago. I'm in Chicago right now. What part are we from?
So I was born and raised in the Austin area. I'm near like Ukrainian Village now. So
Okay, nice. Yeah, by Chicago Avenue and Grand and all that.
that's exactly, yep.
There you go. Okay, cool. Let me see, last but not least, Madison. Welcome to the class, Madison.
Hi, sorry I was a little late, guys. The rain created quite a little bit of traffic. So I'm not entirely sure what all the questions are, but I can kind
Just
of...
your background, who you are and your background.
Okay, I'm Madison Miller. My name does not get mispronounced very easily. I'm from Santa Monica. My family, I'm sort of first generation in the States. My mom grew up in South Africa. My dad, he came when he was quite young, but family is originally from Russia. I've been in the program for about a year. I got my undergrad in psychology from Pitzer College. And I'm not currently working, but my most recent work experience was with adolescents in a residential substance abuse program. And I really enjoyed my work there, and I got to have a lot of exposure to a lot of different kids from a lot of different cultures, which was really nice. And yeah, I'm hoping that this class will really kind of help me to be a more well-rounded practitioner, no matter what direction I go in with psychology.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Madison. Okay, now we got all of our introductions out the way and kind of what we think the class is about. From there, has everyone been able to go through the syllabus, kind of know the expectation, know the assignments and things like that? Any questions about the syllabus? Okay, no questions. All right, excellent. All right, well, we'll start off by kind of going through your questions from the reading assignments, and we could have some sort of class discussions about those. And then from there, we'll go through the lecture, right, the PowerPoint. And maybe I'll pose some questions to where we can go out into break rooms and discuss maybe certain ideas or questions like that. So in terms of questions, how about we do this? How about we go into break rooms now with our questions, right? And discuss with one another. Maybe we could go into like groups of 3 and discuss the reading assignments, and then come back and kind of filter the questions with the rest of the class to kind of find like what was the most important thing you read, or the most curious thing you read, or the most interesting thing you read. And then that way we could kind of filter the interaction. How does that sound? Okay, so let's do this. Let's go into breakout rooms. So I can assign automatically, I can let you guys choose. What do you think? You want to choose who you want to go into break rooms with, or just kind of first come, first serve, or you want me to choose? All right, I'll choose. That way no one won't feel, it's going to choose automatically, but that way no one won't feel weird about it. Okay, so we got 4 breakout rooms, 3 participants per room. I'm about to create them now, and they're random. And so here we go. All right, we are all back. Was that helpful? Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
All right.
I think it was helpful. I think we had a pretty nice discussion in our breakout room. And I would just hit two of the main points that we came up with.
Okay.
And one of the main points was in the cultural self-assessment section that we had to read. One of the main questions that we kind of agreed on was, how do we, I guess not impose, but get our clients to think as we think without using biases and judgments? Because when they come in, they're going to come in with issues and problems, and 85% of the time it's going to involve somebody else. And it's probably not even the fact that they probably have an issue or a trauma or what have you with that person. It's probably the fact that they're themselves are using biases and judgments and not understanding cultural and, you know, different contexts and stuff like that. So how are we supposed to help them to understand that some of the issues in their life maybe not even be issues, just the point that they not understanding, you know, other people's perspectives and cultures and how they do. And then the second thing that we had was actually just all of the readings combined, studying multicultural. We were trying to figure out, is that not making us judgmental and biased from the start, because we're learning things from a textbook, and the textbooks is telling us that this is how these people are, this is what they do, this is how they live, and yet that's not true for all. So if we go into a session that, okay, my book said, don't look them in the eye, don't not, you know, they don't look in the eye, that's rude, that's this, that. But as they grow and as they learn, a lot of people kind of, you know, integrate things and they change. And, you know, if they're not looking at you in the eye, then yeah, maybe you won't look them in the eye. But then if you don't look them in the eye just because they're not looking you know, at them, would they take that as rude if they know about, you know, cultural and how we do react? So we was kind of confused on that and was wondering, like, are we not still being judgmental and biased?
Yeah, no, and I get it. I mean, you probably the most principal question a person can have about dealing with multicultural counseling would be, how is this even possible, right? So for things from like, we all are biased, our clients may be biased, we might be biased, right? From all the nurture we've had, or our attitude at the time, or we had a bad day. Maybe we came across somebody who we feel is even of the same background, and now we got a judgmental, stereotypical ideation about them, right? Imposing our beliefs. So it's an ongoing process, right? There's no one day where you wake up and now you figured everything out, how to approach all different types of cultures, right? But the main point is to the awareness part, right? If the more we are aware about ourselves and how we may come off to others, the more we'll be aware about others and how they could come off towards us. So I would say the best sort of summation in the initial approach, right, is more of explanatory. That's kind of what sum up maybe even both of the chapters we read. Asking questions to explain what it is you're feeling, why is that important, how does that make meaning for you? So it's sort of these explaining models that are in the chapters. And from there, like with any other discussion we have with somebody, it gets deeper. So the more you are able to let others convey more information, that, you know, the rabbit hole gets deeper about what actually is bothering them, right? Why is that important? Why is that being valued in this situation? How does it make a person truly feel? So it's more of, I would say it's sort of digging a hole with questions, right? Digging a hole with questions. You know, it's kind of 21 questions. And from there, like questions on top of questions. so that you can kind of truly understand how the behavior is manifesting itself outward or being expressed verbally, or vice versa, right? How the thoughts are being expressed into a behavior of some sort. That's kind of a simple way of, I would say, of explaining initially, right? And we'll get more in depth as time goes on about other modes and models and frameworks and things like that. Who else? Someone else can go ahead with sort of whatever you had, opinions, perceptions, questions, doesn't matter. Looks like Chandler may have put up her hand first, so I'll let her go. And then I'll go to you next, Megan.
We were just kind of discussing like how, like as a therapist, like will you be able to get this like bigger worldview or be able to work with, you know, different cultures and stuff. And we were just talking about like kind of just throwing ideas of like maybe even, you know, researching a little bit, like let's say you get like your client background and you like even just taking those few minutes before you meet with your client to kind of like, you know, research that background a little bit. And it even could be something as simple as like a greeting that's maybe normal, or, you know, being able to do those little things just to make your client a little bit more comfortable, or even like if it's something that or if it's a population, like not limiting yourself to one type of population, like it may be hard in the beginning, but kind of opening up to working with a bunch of different cultures, a bunch of different populations. And, you know, we were saying like, obviously you might not be able to relate, but being able to like understand is really important. Like just having that type of understanding and that empathy is like really important as a therapist. So, you know, those are just kind of a couple of things that we were discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think of it this way. If you were to travel to a foreign environment and place yourself in that foreign environment, you have to learn, right? In order to make sense of everything, how to navigate yourself appropriately, how to communicate appropriately, what is important to these people that may not be important to you, right? So it's kind of like placing yourself in a foreign environment to where you just need to start from a blank slate and learn about a particular person's culture, meaning their history, their values, and even their take on trauma, you know, whatever kind of trauma that they're facing, like what is their perspective on that particular trauma, right? Because everyone's perspective is different, but if you come from a different culture other than sort of American culture, the way that you view that thing could be completely 180 than what we are traditionally taught to address, you know, from a Western point of view, right? But once again, you know, it doesn't make it easy. And like, you know, it's not like a on-off switch where it comes on. The point is to immerse yourself in learning and asking practical questions to people so that you're able to better engage and make it make sense to you, right? And therefore, you could create initial conversations that can foster trust, credibility, and I would say most importantly, trust, right? Because trust leads to comfort, and the more comfortable people are, the more honest they will be with you and the more they will convey. You know, so in essence, if you take a random conversation you have with anyone on the street, and let's just say they may be completely different than you, they may look different, and you can maybe surmise that they may come from a different background of some sort. What are some of the practices you would use to have a decent conversation with them where something's actually learned and gained, right? I would say that's like sort of initial test for yourself. You're like, hey, when I come across XYZ person, how do I typically act towards them? Do I sort of push my own narrative onto them? Am I aggressive? Am I open? And kind of work from that approach, because really it starts with us as opposed to the other person. It starts with us opening up and sort of removing all the things that we kind of learn, keeping them for our own, but removing them in the sense of now I'm interacting with somebody who needs my help. And so I would say some of those are the simplest practices. Megan, you were next.
We were actually in the same group, so I was
Okay,
gonna kind of say the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a class I took last term, this topic came up and our professor said exactly the same thing. Like, it's okay to ask questions. And I thought about, like, I've gone to therapists that are much older than me, and I've had to kind of explain things about my generation.
yeah.
And, I think it's okay to do that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I teach a few courses. So I teach business and I teach psychology. And so, I teach undergrad and graduate. So even a generational gap, let alone I teach a lot of international students. So it's not only generational gap between maybe me and them, right? There's also sometimes language barriers. And sometimes they already have a preconceived notion about America, right? And this, what you see, we're all kind of formed a lot from entertainment all around the world, right? Kind of how we view other people's countries, their cultures, and what we think about them typically formed from entertainment. But as you get deeper, dive and get conversations into people, you start to realize that what we thought were so many differences actually could be applied to very simple similarities, but just different forms of how we view similar things. So in essence, we may look at this class and think, oh man, this is so complex, people are so different. Like, no, they're not really, right? We're all from the same species. We just all look at things from a different lens, from different perspective, and what's important to one may not be important to another, right? And so, we live in a culture now where it's highly politicized here in America. And so we live in a very sensitive culture now, right? Things are very, very sensitive and heightened. And so, people typically shut people off and they don't want to hear it, right? We don't live in a culture where, I think would be healthier if we say like, hey, I disagree, but I understand, right? We live now in a politicized culture where people are like, I don't understand, nor do I disagree, meaning that they don't want to understand, right? We're human beings, we can understand each other, whether it's the most vile thought or a thought that it totally agrees with our moral, ethical viewpoints and worldviews in our history. Also to consider too is power dynamics, right? As a therapist or counselor towards a client, I think there's an innate sort of view to take as an authoritative figure, right? Which is, I've seen a lot of therapists kind of become that, right? They're authoritative figure, not really a friend, right? And I think it's way more helpful to become, as a therapist, to actually help be professional and diagnose properly. But I think ultimately you have to become a friend to where someone opens up the most intimate details of why things are the way they are according to them, according to the way they see what is happening to them or what's wrong with them. Okay. Who's next? Anybody else got anything to add? That's it? No other perspectives? All right, before we jump into sort of the lecture, right, we'll make the class interesting. What are some of the opinions of, right, because what are some of the opinions about what's going on with our country right now, right? We all American, but, right, I don't think anyone here, is everybody here in American, well, not American city, but everyone here is living in the US, right? Right now, so we speak, okay. So we could kind of see what's going on with our country, with the biases, the divide, the divisions, the hatred, which pertains to this course and sort of the topics we're discussing. But what are some of our thoughts about why we think the way things are going the way that they're going right now as we live here? Anybody can add? Okay, Kyle, I see your hand. I'll let you have it.
Well, I'm not gonna jump into like a specific topic or anything. I'm going to speak really generally, and I'm also not attacking any one group of people here, 'cause everybody's failing at this. But people in recent years have become, and it, I don't know, maybe it's certain subjects. I hear it with a lot of different things, but people have become so hypersensitive about everything. It doesn't even, I mean, you can't, I see a lot of instances you can't even say anything to people anymore without somebody getting offended or getting just high and mighty, whatever the case is. And the reason I say that is because, you know, when you take that position, brain kind of shuts off and people don't want to listen anymore, you know, and that's the big problem with what's going on. People are just not listening to each other. You know, I hear people making statements about this and that. They'll give their position on something, and then the other people respond. They're just not listening, you know, and that's what drives me nuts most about this, is because it's the one of the skills that we're, you know, being taught here as psychology students is, you know, the ability to listen. And I know that's difficult sometimes, but I just see a serious lack of people hearing each other, and it's leading to a lot of problems. So I'm just speaking really generally. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's probably all you can do is speak generally. Like, we're trying to just our viewpoints of what's going on and sum it all up into one big ball. Yeah, I mean, listening is a huge part, right? Think of Freud, you know, with psychoanalysis, the main part is just letting people talk, right? You're sitting on the couch, I'm facing the opposite way, and we're just doing free association, and you're just talking. You're getting all your thoughts out, all the thoughts you may have not gotten out into the world, right? And you don't want to bottle them up. And we could say from there, it's like, hey, okay, I hear everything that you're saying. Now it can make more sense to me as I try to process what you're saying, right? And therefore we could have a line of communication. If there's no line of communication, there's nowhere to go from there, right? So that's even important in dealing with our clients. It's like, how do we keep open the line of communication? Yes, things will come up where they may be agitated, they may be aggravated, or we may say something that offends somebody. We may, they may be sensitive to something. And so therefore we have to keep in mind, like, okay, we have to keep the ball rolling, right? So we have to keep asking the hard questions, keep going past the uncomfortable sort of feelings we would have about people and their sensitivities or whatever, because we're trying to learn about them, right? Which makes it more exciting. Like, the more you can learn about a person, the more you can engage, and, you know, things could start off rough, but eventually blossom into a beautiful relationship, you know, client and therapist. Okay, Kashay, you hit the raise hand button, so I'll let you go next.
I just wanted to say what was going on in this world today and the differences of what have you. I just think it's pretty much selfish. Everybody is pretty much clicked up in their own little townships, and it don't seem that anyone wants to understand anyone else, and they don't want to listen, they don't want to communicate, and they don't want to compromise. So it's causing a major issue. And we was you said something earlier about the dynamics of the knowing about the multicultural and being in awareness. And I think that is one of the major issues now in this world. It's like nobody is aware of anything. And Maya made a good point when we was talking earlier about, you know, when you walk in and you see a therapist, you already pretty much don't put your presumptions in your head that they're not going to understand, they're not like me, this, that, and the other, regardless of the fact if they have, you know, studied multiculturalism or what have you.
Yeah.
But you're not going to listen to them, and because in your head you already they don't know, they don't understand. So I think that's a lot of what is going on in the world today, and it just take the prejudice and the bias and the, you know, the stereotype into a whole new level. And it just seems like everybody is just mad for no reason because nobody wants to communicate, and it's just burning down the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a rough time, which makes all the better. While there's a need for us. And while topics like this are expanding kind of all through all types of universities, and these discussions are being had. So it's very, very important. But we can see it because it's manifesting everywhere. Everyone is concerned about mental health now, right? Mental health is just huge for everybody. Before, people would just sweep things under the rug. So it's definitely a need. There's a demand for things that we're learning. And these are new topics, right? Multiculturalism is, as the world is changing with technology and borders are opening up for people, is new, which makes it even more exciting, right? So we're gonna learn new things and add new things to it and ask questions that aren't being asked, because there's a lot of questions that's not being asked, right? And there's a lot of maybe components of this field or this subject that haven't been tackled yet, right? So it's an open landscape, but I would say that, right, you guys are all educated with your backgrounds and you all come from your walks of life. So, and we all have life experience, so we're able to understand human nature at the basis level, right? Human nature at the basis level, we look around, we say, wow, people are tribal. People are tribalistic, right? In any way, whether it's an open, free society, whether you go and look in the prison systems, you're like, oh, people linked up in their groups. They linked up with their tribe. Why did they link up with their tribe? One, either the system made it to force people to link up with their tribes. Two, people felt that they would be more empowered with linking up with their quote unquote tribes because they feel more comfortable. And we are taught this comfort, right? There's a learned behavior to think because someone looks completely different, that makes it an oddity and a discomfort to have intimate communications with them and to learn and understand them. So we have to understand ourselves. We're like, oh man, this is a learned behavior. You know, if we really analyze ourselves, understand our belief systems, our values, a lot of times it's just really, we've picked off things that probably been shoved down our throats. We ate it, you know, and now we just keep it. And now we're trying to figure out ourselves too, also while trying to help other people too, right? So, so we have to distinct first human nature, looking at tribalism and understanding that people link in groups and now also forcing groups, governments close borders, government forces ideologies, structures of religious beliefs, structures of political beliefs, and you know all these different things. And then from there, we can kind of branch out and spread to see the nuances of things. But I would say start off with the simple template of the basis, like, man, human nature is structured this way, right? We can generalize in some way, right? Generalization is necessary, it's a part of life. So we can generalize to look at the whole picture. Then we'll try to dissect by asking questions. But then we may find out that, hey, this is completely not what I thought, right? This is a lot of similarities. People want to love like I want to love. People want to make money like I want to make money. People want decent. Then we start to say like, oh man, it's a lot similar. So it makes it a lot easier as you go on, instead of being so sort of having your own fears about the differences in people when they may not even be present, right? And which is a stereotype. So it's like asking questions may remove our own fears because it's like, oh, we realize it's not as different as we thought it would be, right? But if we don't ask those questions, guess what? We walk away with how we came in, right? And we have the same issues, the same biases, which we started with. You know, we keep picking off the people as if they're a totally different species other than human, like the rest of us. Okay, who else? Someone else had. Anybody else? Madison, go ahead.
Yeah, actually sort of jumping off of sort of almost everything you said and something some other people mentioned, like in a very general way, sort of when I've like sort of looked at the world and been like, okay, why are people kind of reacting like this? Why are people, grouping up? Why are people sort of struggling to communicate with people in different groups and things like that, and just sort of where we're at right now as a country? The thing that sort of kind of keeps occurring to me is that I really do think a lot of that might come from fear. And I think there's a lot of scary things that are happening in the world right now. We're seeing a lot of really big systems change in a lot of different ways, a lot of really big global events going on, climate issues, like things are tense. We have a lot of great developments as well right now, but there's a lot going on in our country and globally. And so I think people feel safer kind of relying on the sort of in-group, out-group, like, okay, I think I can trust this because it looks just like me and I trust myself, obviously. So
Yeah.
there's that, but I really I wonder how much fear is coming into that. I had a political psychology class in undergraduate where it was sort of talking about political campaigning and how some are successful and some aren't. And fear was a really big part of how sort of candidates would try to communicate with the voters and kind of sway opinions and stuff like that. And so looking at fear generally as sort of a motivation for lack of communication between people is something I've sort of been looking at recently. And I honestly think maybe the internet has a lot to do with it because we can see more of what's going on everywhere, and that how that impacts us and how we feel versus, if everything seems really big and scary, what is that going to make us do at home in our own country? Stuff like that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, that fear is a motivation and driving force for a lot of the behavior that we see out in the world. In which case, going back to the chapter, talking about self-assessment, right? Cultural self-assessment, just self-assessment in general. We are also clients. We're clients because we have fears, right? So therefore, we have to kind of address with ourselves, why are we fearful? So we have to start asking these questions to ourselves. Why do I feel this way about this particular thing happening in the world? Is it real, or is it something I placed in my mind from the projection of others or social media or news or what people told me it should be? Do I believe in this fear? Do I truly believe in this type of fear that I have about others or the world or what's going on? Is it a reality in my immediate life, in my direct life, or is it reality in some far off land that really doesn't directly affect me, that I'm not sure about? So that's that cultural or self-assessment, I would say, asking yourself the same questions, pretending like you were the client, right? The same questions to get down to the nitty-gritty of, why does this bother me? Is this something I should be bothered by? How does this affect my life? Why does it affect my life? Right? And so that's sort of that self-assessment. And if you could practice that with self, obviously that would make it more easier to others, right? Because you're basically placing yourself in the shoes of almost like another person, right? You're kind of standing out from self and analyzing self from almost a third person point of view, which is really, really important, because really you may come to some conclusions that, that are in the subconscious, right? And then you bring it up to the conscious that you're fully aware of now that you weren't before. And you may come to some different conclusions like, hey, I shouldn't be afraid of this. This is nothing to be frightened of, right? Maybe the world is not like this primarily. Maybe it's just a subset that's being promoted to be like this, right? Maybe it's just some sort of hyper, newsworthy stuff that's projected onto us. So yeah, that to me is like part of the self-assessment, asking yourself deep diving questions to see what you really feel is a reality, or what you really feel is not a reality. Maybe it is not, right? So we have to kind of be therapists to the therapist in order to gain some insight, in order to try to understand others, and also create that sort of practice. So therefore you might have your own model after asking yourself so many questions. You may have your own model that you could use for clients. And you're like, hey, I have a standard model how to get down to the bare bones of issues and how things will make meaning to people. Because I've tried it on myself and I figured out this is how I make meaning for myself. Anybody else before we dive just into the PowerPoint and lectures? Is there anybody else that want to add or comment or anything?
I'll add something quick, if that's all right.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had the thought, there's this show I have seen a few times. It's called The United Shades of America.
Mhm.
And it's a I think he's a comedian and a journalist, and it's this guy who basically like goes around to different groups in America and has these conversations with them and just asks questions and kind of like fringe groups, like the certain things that I think a lot of us in this room would immediately have like a bias towards, or yeah, but basically a lot of the time where it ends up is kind of like what you were saying, where it's like I disagree but I understand.
Yeah,
It's at least the conversation's being had and there's some understanding. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and think about that as the client therapist relationship is not about when we're kind of talking about politics or belief systems where people are trying to force their viewpoint on others, and people are highly offended that they're trying to force their viewpoint on you, right? You're but in essence that we're not taking up other people's viewpoints, we're not taking up their religious beliefs, we're not taking up anything. What we're trying to do is have the greatest understanding that we could possibly have about the nature of the person we're talking to and why things are valuable to them and their background, and have some sort of empathy and understanding just as a human being so that we could better help them get out of their situation, right? And so in essence, it's not about them shaping us into be some other type of person. We should remain intact for our own personal values, beliefs. And this class is not to shape you, right? Not to change your perspectives on, what you believe in, what you value, right? Keep your own values to yourself, but in a professional sense, you are like an engineer trying to understand the nitty gritty of what it is the person in front of you having issue with, and why that issue is there, and how can you diagnose and help and treat that person, right? So that's part of the whole kind of removing yourself out of the picture, but still keeping part of yourself, right? Because it makes it interesting. You remove yourself, do you remove your personality? Your personality makes you. It makes you a friendly person, a funny person, a kind person, whatever kind of person. So you definitely need to have personality intact, who you are, who you truly are. And in which that means that some clients are not made for certain therapists, right? Not everybody we come across that we're going to be perfect for, which is like even go to a doctor, medical doctor, you'd be like, hey, I want a second and third opinion because this person may not be for me, right? So we always have to keep an open mind at that. But what we do want to do is try to shape to be the best therapist and trying to dig deep and asking questions in a way to get real honest answers about who people are, So that's, I would say, maybe the main viewpoint. Anybody else? All right. So before lectures, I would just say after this class, since you've all kind of met one another, try to figure out who you want to work with in your group, right? For your group presentations, your group project. Figure out who you want to work with and what sort of group you want to target as sort of your project to work with, right? So just kind of from the glimpse of everyone's personality that you've seen so far, try to, communicate with one another to be like, hey, do you have experience in this, or do you find this interesting? Do you have an interest in, I have an idea about these group of people, right? And kind of fill each other out to figure out who you want to be in your groups for your presentations. Sounds good? All right. All right, we're gonna wrap up with lecture, which is normally the most boring part of any class, but I'll try to do what I can with it. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. And hold on. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm pulling this up real quick. All right, I'm gonna share my screen right now. All right, you guys able to see my screen? Okay, good. Okay, is it big enough to see the words and everything on it? Okay. All right, so multicultural counseling, some therapy geared towards white, middle, upper class individuals, right? This is sort of I would say the modern context of things is looking at more minority based issues, right? For people who may not have appropriate resources towards others who are maybe dominant in economic fashions or political fashions, right? And so we're looking more at minorities and trying to help them. These have been a historical shift, right? Previously, therapy was geared towards more white, middle, upper class individuals, right? People with money, people who are well educated, and people who had access to these types of resources, right? So guys like Freud and Jung, typically they study upper class, middle, white individuals as their clients, and a lot of minorities were sort of left out of being assessed from a therapeutic point of view. Some of the forces there, as you guys know from basic psychology, is psychodynamic, behaviorism, things like Skinner and things like that, as existentialism, humanism, things that derive from philosophical viewpoints, right? And then the U.S. has increasing diversity. So our country is a microcosm of planet Earth, right? So this makes it the greatest place to do analysis because we may have people from all walks of life, but for the most part, they may speak relatively good English, right? So that eliminates the language barrier. And so these forces led to analyzing multiculturalism and social advocacy for those who are disenfranchised or disempowered in some sort. What exactly is multicultural counseling? It's the integration of cultural identities within the counseling process. Basically taking components of what you do in traditional therapies and other parts of psychology, but adding the cultural component as a factor of value to gaining some really good diagnoses and help for people. Culture is the shared values, practices, social norms, and worldviews associated with a particular group. Right? The role of American culture is discussed there. The use of counseling services, culturally diverse clients underuse and prematurely terminate counseling services due to attitudinal factors. Attitude is big because attitude can be nonverbal, body language, eye movement, facial expressions, right? And those translate to beliefs about the therapist personally and professionally about the counseling process. So, bad attitudes towards an individual in which they feel that they're being discriminated against or biased against, people would tend to not return and want to continue therapy with that because they feel like the person's not going to do them justice. Some structural factors, systemic barriers that determine the availability of counseling to an individual. Obviously, there could be like socioeconomic status, whether a person can afford it, whether a person has proper transportation, get to you, Those are more direct, but systemic would be like, well, are people even within the circles to see you as a counselor? Because maybe your counselors all tend to have the same demographic sort of identities, right? And so there's a little bit of discrimination there, even within the structure of some therapy availability. Therapy versus cultural norms. Counseling values mirror those of the dominant US culture, right? Individualism versus collectivism. The US is an individualistic culture. We're typically out for self. And even if we do want to help others, we think we need to help ourselves first in order to help others. Other societies around the world have a different viewpoint on that. Many cultures see themselves as sort of a beehive, which means if one person falls, all people fall. One person doing bad, that makes the entire society looks bad. That makes the entire group look bad. Here in America, we're like, well, one person looks bad, it doesn't make me look bad. That has nothing to do with me. That has to do with them. So it's just a different perspective on how people view their society, other groups, other people within the society. That makes it a little bit more difficult here, right? Because we all are different from different walks of life with different histories. We may not have the luxury of other countries where people do look clearly identical or similar to one another, right? We don't have the luxury, which makes us even more unique and a great place to live. But we don't have the luxury of the same type of ideologies, maybe everybody, the majority believing in the same religious belief systems, same values, traditions, history, et cetera, et cetera. So our country makes it a little bit more different, but nonetheless, we are individualistic, which creates problems if you're definitely trying to help people, because that requires sort of a collectivist perspective. So yeah, that preference for increased self-awareness, self-disclosure, emotional expression, linear time orientation, and goal-directedness, right? We typically want to create goals that are all individualistic. Other people around the world, more interdependent and limited disclosure. You know, I've traveled all around and not everywhere even recognizes the field of psychology. There are places around the world where more spiritual practices are substituted for we would say a logical, reasonable perspective on behavior and actions and things we would describe as disorders and traumas and issues. So a lot of times those things are kept to the person or the group. And there's not a lot of expression, their openness, because it may be seen as a sign of weakness based on the culture, or there may be some sort of fear about expressing it, those sort of sentiments. Stigma and mistrust. All right, some cultures view mental illness as something to be discussed only within a specific community. They rely on family as their therapist. They rely on the community and spiritual leaders. So they rely on those people as opposed to a professional practice of mental health, right? Those people they find to be more trusting than someone who just would be more, institutionally educated on it and uses it as a practice for their own business or benefit. The way normality and abnormality are defined in counseling, right? Hey, what's normal here may not be normal elsewhere. People do things different. Those are things to consider and also adjust. Think of Darwin, right? Darwin is not, the survival of the species is not, of any species, is really not about the strongest person. Strongest person doesn't lead to adaptation. It's not about the genius person. That doesn't lead to, it's about the person more readily available to change. Those, in essence, that is what survives for any species. So it's kind of apply that to the person who's more apt to change. based on the changing factors in their environment, i.e. being a therapist with a person who may present things that are not normal to you, doesn't mean you stop the counseling or therapy, but you kind of move with it. You move with it, you find it to be a curiosity to learn more about why things are going the way they're going. And therefore you come to better conclusions than if you just give up. Prejudice and inappropriate application of cultural issues may lead to misdiagnosis. I saw this a lot even when I was finishing my PhD, and a lot of people were doing dissertation research across different cultures. There was always a lot of issues about even getting their dissertation passed. It didn't pass a lot of ethics committees, right? Because some of the questions being asked to these groups were very, I would say, insensitive. It wasn't well thought out, and it definitely sounded like an American person asking another American. And I wouldn't say that's the best approach, right? Yes, you're an American person asking a question, but you do want to gain insight into the culture of the person that you're asking, to say, am I asking it in a way that I won't offend and that I'm able to continue the line of communication with, instead of breaking the line of communication with. So yeah, application of cultural issues may lead to misdiagnosis. Diagnosing things from a viewpoint that's completely off because you don't have appropriate information from that person. People have had discrimination experiences, right? How many people have just even placed themselves in some environment where they felt ostracized or stigmatized and felt discriminated? And if that setting was a quote unquote mental health or therapy session or something, then people are going to feel not apt to go back and have those experiences again, because that experience might be traumatic, right? All the more means that you're going to work harder to sort of get past that person's experiences of discrimination. We've all experienced discrimination, I'm sure, at some point. So we know what it's like, and we want to try not to do that to others. And fear of institutionalization, which is people are feared of being quote unquote placed with some sort of diagnoses or stigmatized to be placed in some facility, right? People have fear. In other countries, the regulations and rules may not be as staunch as America's, and therefore people could be labeled as, something negative that could get them institutionalized or placed in some sort of camp, placed in some sort of prison system, placed in some sort of facility that's very unpleasing. Inaccessibility of services, right? Think from your viewpoint of what you have accessibility to, and think about how you may have access to things, and then you go drive out and you see the people who clearly won't have access to those sorts of things. And think about how those persons may feel on a day-to-day basis and how they live. Just a simple taking yourself out of your own shoes and maybe trying to place yourself into others gives you a pretty good change of viewpoint of the luxuries that we may have as, therapists, with able to transport ourselves and get healthcare and eat a good lunch and have a place to live and have a practice, versus a person who's just literally struggling to survive. So we always have to be aware of their socioeconomic status. One of the things here in Chicago, for example, right, just sort of a real case scenario, is that there's a lot of crime, right? There's a lot of rampant crime, and depending on what's going on, and whatever, in a political cycle and an economic cycle, things could get worse or things could get better. And so a lot of friends of mine will ask, like, well, why in certain neighborhoods are people so angry? Why are people so sensitive? Why are people so ready and on edge here in certain neighborhoods when you go drive out? Guess why? Because their livelihood is not the same as others who have other things that they don't. So if people are angry and on edge, guess why? It may be because they're poor or struggling or just struggling just to get basic needs and just living a very, very hard life. Doesn't mean that they are just innately criminalistic. Doesn't mean that they're innately evil, right? And we could pose our views to be like, oh, you make choices and decisions. But one will change those choices and decisions based on the circumstance in which they come from. And so having a bit of empathy based on circumstance gives good insight into why behaviors tend to be rampant based on even certain lower socioeconomic status groups. Because if you change the amount of money you have and you weren't able to go to school or eat, I guarantee you that your attitudes will not be the same right now, right? Counseling is often unavailable for non-English speaking clients, which is true. I see that here, even in Chicago, from a lot of Spanish speaking and Polish speaking, those are really big communities here. Spanish speaking and Polish speaking, there's not a lot of services for them because there's not a lot of people even within their community who kind of seek out becoming specific therapists and counselors and psychologists for those groups. So they're kind of left out or just only left to a pool of people they could go to that really feel that they can understand them. And other factors, unemployment, homelessness, transportation, cost prohibitive, diverse groups. Culture and context. Context is extremely important. It's not what you say, sometimes it's how you said it. Because how you said it may mean a lot more, right? And the chapter even talked about low and high context groups. There's a lot of extra meaning in words, depending on how you said it. There's a lot of extra meaning in words in different cultures and different languages. Whereas here, you could say in America, we're kind of direct, right? People are direct. The time is direct. There's no flexibility. 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock. There's no excuses. You know, I said what I said. This is what I meant. There's no filter. In other cultures, there's more context. Things don't have to be said as much, but very short way of saying things say a lot. So keeping those things in mind, context is extremely important, right? Giving a little bit more of explanation about what's being said as opposed to just saying something. In resistance to multiculturalism. Hey, maybe some people don't want to subscribe to multiculturalism. Maybe some people may feel comfort in their tribe, their group. They don't want to venture out, right? There's racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, ethnocentrism, right? Ageism exists within the counseling profession and prevent change. Some people say, hey, I'm a therapist. I want to make my life easy. I tend to talk to people who look like me, who I could clearly understand, and this makes it a lot easier. They're from my generation or my sexual orientation, my background, and that's it. So there's some resistance to it. Basically, people saying, hey, I want more comfort and an easy practice than taking on the harder thing of trying to understand people who are different, right? Not all treatments look like traditional empirically supported treatments that therapists may be comfortable using, and some therapists may be unwilling to relinquish the power associated with the expert role, which I talked about earlier, right? Some way we all have pride, especially for you guys, once you become whatever you become, doctor such and such, there's going to be a point of pride and maybe a point of even arrogance a point of power, point of authoritarian perspectives. And those are things that probably won't translate well if you're trying to help people, right? All this stuff sounds great if you're having a social conversation at a party or something. But if you're truly, truly trying to help people and gain access to who they are and immerse yourself into their background and what's important to them, you know, it has to, those perspectives have to be set aside, right? Not saying they have to be set aside once you leave your practice. You could be just as proud and, you know, excited and boastful about your achievements or your practice or what have you. But if you're helped in the setting of being a professional, definitely want to kind of put on a different hat. Culture. So think, lastly, I'll end off with this.
To ask a question before you went on to that section right there.
Okay.
On the section we just got through talking about, you was talking about the comfort and learning of the different cultures and stuff like that. So is it a hinder or is it helpful when we do get a client that's of a different culture and we're not as knowing as we should be or need to be or want to be? Is it more helpful for us to try to work with them and work through them and gain the knowledge to help them, or to find another therapist that's more qualified? I mean, how do we handle that?
So think of it this way. Even if someone spoke their language, understood their culture in and out, and come from the same culture, the value of your training, your education, your perspective is completely different than that therapist. So you provide value in other areas that maybe a person who even has that same background does not. And you learning these things about unbiased approach gives you a cleaner slate than someone who already has a bias. Because if that person is from the same culture and reinforcing everything that person sort of believes in, they might not come to a good treatment. They may not come to a good diagnosis. Because they're sort of painting with the same paintbrush, the same issues. Having a bigger world point of view for any issue is better than someone who's gonna really just soak up what you're saying and be agreeable to it. Because there's also a bias to be agreeable, to say, hey, I understand we're from the same thing, which doesn't lead a lens to say, hey, what about this? What about that? There's some questions that's not gonna be asked by these people. There's some questions way off from over here, and then we could come to some different conclusions about the issues. So I would say there's value in everybody, whether you are from that culture or not, that background or not. There's value in everybody to bring something a little bit different to that person that needs help. And you just have to assess, after having, you know, several conversations, using your skills, of whether or not you're gonna bring that value to them or someone else will bring that value to them. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that somebody from the same culture gives the best treatment. That's far furthest from the truth, because it doesn't allow for an expanse of the mind for that person, coming around with different approaches and methods and things like that.
But we won't hinder the person's progression by trying to enhance our learning of their culture and trying to treat them at the same time, will we?
No, well, it's so many other factors. Because once again, persona is a big part too, right? So you're thinking like, hey, I can't help this person because they're completely different and I'm still trying to learn about them. And if you walk away from that, you've really devalued what we're learning altogether about psychology, right? That psychology is a universal thing into getting inside the human brain, mind, soul, spirit, to try to understand what's going on with the person and use some tried and true methodologies and applications to help them. It's a universal. People can help from all over to all types of different people, but it really is maybe a case-by-case basis. So if it's saying like, hey, I'm still learning by trying to help you, absolutely, that's phenomenal, because everybody's trying to learn while trying to help somebody. You don't know somebody who just walks through your door and immediately click to solve their problems. So it's really a case-by-case basis. But I say, don't sell yourself short initially, as we're just starting this class off. Don't sell yourself short of thinking that you can't help someone because they're too different. That's the point of the course. It's trying to have a bigger picture in our mind about helping people who are completely different than us. Okay, it's 2 minutes past, but I'll end off with this. Here in the US, there's always a convolution to place everything into one ball. And typically when you have just general conversations with people, they lump culture, race, ethnicity, all these things in one big ball, and they never separate them, right? So it's good to kind of know the difference between the two, whether things are based off of history, a lineage, whether things are really social constructs constructed by society for whatever reasons they're constructed by, and whether people are part of something that they want to be part of, right? Sort of like a culture. Maybe you can move in and out of culture if you want to. Maybe you can come and leave. Maybe you say you can't go and leave from race. Maybe you say you're stuck in race, right? So we have to try to understand a little bit better of how these things are transmitted, how these things are constructed, and sort of some of the facets of them and how they kind of come into play. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that during next class. But for now, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you all have a good night. We'll pick this up next week, and we'll talk more online for now, but we'll end the lecture here. How's that sound? Good? All right, if there's no more questions, I will let you guys go to enjoy your night.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Okay, have a good night, you guys. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.